Oh. Oh, I got the wrong camera on.
Hey, Marty.
Well, we don't have a quorum yet, so. We can talk, we can't do business. Still too short of a quorum, I think. Total of 36 people signed on, a couple of whom are, 39. How about we've got a quorum now? Let me look here.
Hey, Matt, this is Kevin from AV. I'll go ahead and start the recording if that's okay now.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, that's fine. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
And I think we have a quorum, so let's start the meeting. Even with the couple of non-senators who are logged in. So welcome to the 6th regular meeting of the University Senate. I have a few announcements. I'll do a screen share here, and mostly to help remind me what I need to announce. You should now be able to see the 6th regular meeting thing. And, oops, I got to get over to my PowerPoint here. And so let us call the meeting to order at 3:11 here. Reminder, the meeting is being recorded. Kevin just reminded us all he was starting the meeting. I wanted to remind you, Senate elections should be starting very soon. I encourage you to nominate your friends or enemies, whichever you think is most appropriate, to be on various Senate committees. In particular, be sure to nominate folks to faculty grievance and tenure promotion and dismissals. And just as a reminder, the faculty that serve on those committees must be tenured faculty. The Senate Elections Committee is also going to be conducting elections for faculty representatives for the search committee for the new Vice President for Equity and Diversity. And I believe President Standerford will say some more about that later on in his remarks. Senate exec has asked contractual arrangements to begin a process to develop handbook language about compensation for chairs. I know most of you aren't chairs, but for those of us who are, it is interesting to note that there's virtually no language in the handbook about benefits which accrue to chairships. We've also asked them to consider revisions to handbook language around tenure, promotion, dismissal processes. After speaking with the chair of that committee, this is not critical this year, so most likely we'll start that up in the fall. I want to point out, one of our colleagues pointed out to me that some of the items that should have showed up with the Senate President designation in CRCRS went directly to the provost, so they skipped a step. And what skipping that step meant is that they've been forwarded to the provost without a vote by the Senate. Instead of asking the provost's office to return all of those items to me, I think it makes more sense to have only those which are not approved sent back to me so I can send it back to CNR. And by the way, these are routine things. They're course additions and modifications to programs. So they'll be mostly they're parts of the consent agenda, but if for some reason they would not be approved, then the provost's office can send them back to me and I'll send them back to CNR. I just wanted to bring it to your attention in case anybody else noticed that there was an irregularity. I'm not sure what the problem was. I don't know if it was something I did or if it's something in CRCRS. The day that I was doing the Senate agenda prep stuff, I was having internet connectivity issues, and I may have inadvertently clicked on something twice and forwarded some of that stuff out of my box. So Andy Kinder and I had a conversation about this. We'll see if it happens again. If it does, we'll get CRCRS folks to start looking at it. And with that, I think we can move on to more of the business. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the 5th regular meeting of the University Senate. Can I have such a motion?
So moved.
And who was that?
Jeannie
Is that Jeannie?
Bukowski. Yeah.
Jeannie, thank you. Second, please.
Second.
And that was Meg Frazier who did the second. Thank you, Meg. Any discussion, corrections, or additions to the minutes, deletions? Hearing none, we will try a voice vote. If there's any confusion, then we'll go to a ballot. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the 5th regular meeting of the University Senate, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. Is Emma Hoytia with us tonight or this afternoon? I will take silence to mean no. All right, so let us go on. The next items on the agenda are reports from curricula, reports from committees. There is a long list of consent agenda items. I'll give you a moment to read each screen if you don't have your copy of the agenda up. If you need to go back, let me know. All right, so that's the end of the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that anyone would like to pull out and discuss individually? Hearing no such suggestions, we will consider the consent agenda to have been approved. We need motions for the following. There's a concentration modification, theater performance. May I have a motion?
So moved, Dan Matissa.
Thanks, Dan.
I'll second Steve Banning.
Thanks, Steve. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the concentration modification for theater performance, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, the motion carries. Concentration modification for theater production. I would entertain a motion.
So moved, Dan Matissa.
Thanks, Dan. Second.
Steve Banning, I second.
Thanks, Steve. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the concentration modification for theater production, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. And the ayes have it again. Motion for the major deletion for the 3-2 accounting internal auditing program.
Steve
Silence.
Banning, I'll move.
Thanks, Steve. Second.
I'll second Ed Bond.
Thank you. Who was it that who was it that seconded?
Bond, Ed Bond.
Ed, thanks, Ed. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it again. There's a major deletion for accounting, the just straight accounting 3-2 program, I guess.
I'll move that, Ed Bond.
Ed, thanks, Ed. Second, please.
Second, Teresa Drake.
Thanks, Teresa. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the major deletion for the accounting 3-2 program, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The motion carries. I'll entertain a motion for the major deletion for the accounting 3-2 internal auditing. That's ended up in here twice. I don't think we need to vote on it twice, do we, Mr. Parliamentarian?
There is a slight difference in your list, though. One says 3A and one says IA.
Yeah, I believe they're actually slightly different majors.
Oh, I do see that. Okay, thank you. We will entertain a motion then. Can I have a motion?
This is Eden Blair, so moved.
Thank you, Eden. Second, please.
I'll second Ed Bond.
Okay, thanks, Ed. I was going to say the dog doesn't count. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the major deletion for the accounting 3-2 internal auditing IA program, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. And the ayes have it again. We have a major modification for family and consumer science hospitality leadership. I
So
would consider-
moved, Teresa Drake.
Thank you, Teresa. Second.
Second, Jeannie.
Thanks, Jeannie. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the major modification for hospitality leadership, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and a question just occurs to me for our parliamentarian. Mike, since these are coming out of the CNR, we don't really need seconds on them, do we?
No, we don't.
Okay, thanks. That'll save, what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, I'm not sure we need a vote on each one of them individually if you want to package them all.
Ah, well. Thank you much. Let me see. I don't remember how many there are here. Let me see if I have some on the next slide. Yes, I do. There's several major modifications and a minor deletion. Would anyone like to pull any of them out to deal with separately? Hearing no such suggestions or requests, I would entertain a motion to approve the major modification in computer information systems, the major modification in theater arts, major modification in international business, major modification in the Foster College of Business core curriculum, major modification for nutrition and dietetics, major modification political science, the minor deletion in internal auditing, and the minor modification in political science. Would someone like to make a motion to approve all of those?
So moved. This is Steve Banning.
Thanks, Steve. And we do not need a second according to our parliamentarian. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of this collection of modifications and deletions, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. And the ayes have it. So that all of those changes are approved. We have the academic calendar for 2024 through 25. I did not attach it to my PowerPoint. It was in the agenda. Again, this is coming out of CNR, so I just need a motion.
Wendy. Go ahead.
Wendy Schweigert, I believe, was first for the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the 2024-2025 academic calendar, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Hearing none, the ayes have it. I would entertain a motion to approve the distance terms master calendar for 24-25.
So moved. This is Steve Banning.
Thanks, Steve. For those of you that may not be familiar with the term distance terms master calendar, this is for our online programs offering. This is not about online course offerings. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the distance terms master calendar for 2024-2025, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Hearing, and the ayes have it. I would entertain a motion to approve the proposal to add a summer 3 term. And again, it's attached.
I so move. Naomi Stover.
Thank you, Naomi. Discussion.
Earl George, would this affect the calendar that we just passed?
Somebody from CNR want to address that, please?
I'll go ahead and jump in. Not directly. The calendar that we just passed has a number of landmark dates in there. And the proposal, if you read through it, has identified starting terms and ending terms, as well as holidays that's embedded inside of it. So it should not have any influence now that those calendars are approved and calendars up through 24 and 25 are approved. This proposal has embedded in it the matching dates that we are projecting for every year between now and 24 and 25.
I had a question that was forwarded to me by a constituent. I'll pose to the group or the proposals for this motion. The individual was wondering about compensation for people teaching through, if they were teaching during this summer 3 term. And of course, the person was hoping they would get compensated twice.
I guess I'll try to handle that as best I can. Somebody who has a greater knowledge than me, certainly chime in. Embedded in the proposal and distributed within the agenda, I think you'll read on page 40. There are guidelines and stipulations embedded in the handbook regarding caps that are recommended for summer engagement opportunities, whether it's May 1, May 2, Summer 1, or Summer 2 as they currently stand. Those are recommendations. We saw no need to change the handbook language, but I'll go ahead and read it for those of us who do not have it in front of us. The handbook read on Section 2, Part B, Part 2C 9 on page 43 of the handbook says something in the effect of faculty shall not be contracted for summer employment for more than a total of 2, 3, or 4 semester hour courses per 5-week session or equivalent, except in unusual circumstances. For example, when no other full-time faculty member is available. So we saw no need to change the handbook language in that regard. So compensation will continue to be as summer compensation is typically contracted.
So the 2 1/3% per credit hour, then for, if we're doing a 3-hour course, it'd be 7% of your salary.
That's correct. 2.33 for every single semester credit hour. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Any additional discussion, questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the proposal to add a summer 3 term, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no. Hearing none, the motion carries. And let me see here. I'm going to do I don't think, oh, there is one more. I need to share screen again here. We've got one more item. I do want to put up here. All right. Okay, we have a motion coming out of Senate Exec. And just as a reminder, during the February meeting, Senate Exec was charged with developing language to increase the size of and broaden the cross-campus representation on the ad hoc handbook rewrite committee. The motion's below. You'll notice in the motion that the University Council was not included as a member of the committee. After discussion at Senate Exec, we decided that to consult with Erin on an as-needed basis. We did not do this just to let her out of another meeting. The larger committee will be formed and asked to begin its work in the fall. We thought it was probably not reasonable to try to get another committee started before the end of the semester with a pretty significant charge. So here is the motion. I would entertain a motion from someone to approve.
So moved.
Thanks, Ahmad. And again, this is coming out of Senate Exec, so no second is required. Basic structure, elected members, 1 full-time faculty member from each academic college in the library. What we call diversity nominations, and diversity broadly defined, including various levels of rank and across different types of faculty appointments, gender, ethnicity, etc. Former or current faculty ombudsperson. I did talk to our current faculty ombudsperson, and she thought it would be good to have such a representative on this committee. Representative from HR, and then a past or current Senate president, and basically, in other words, somebody who's on the current smaller committee because that's the primary constituency of that committee. That would provide some continuity. So, any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving this composition of the ad hoc handbook rewrite committee, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. And the motion carries. And I believe that is the last of our action items we have that I'm aware of. So there is no old business. Is there any new business from the floor? Or from the Zoom room, probably more appropriately. Hearing none, I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can enjoy the view a little bit more. And President Standiford, you may have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Matt, and thank you all for joining today. First and foremost, you might see I have my vaccine sticker. I actually went out and got my vaccine, my first round of the vaccine today. And I think you all know this. One of the things that's happening is in the COVID world, things change quickly. Even this time last week, it wasn't clear if and when we as participants in higher education would be eligible for the vaccine. That all changed on Friday of last week. So if you didn't get the message, we've sent out a couple notes around everybody that works in higher ed is now eligible. And if you haven't, I know some of you have already gone through, and actually I know many of you have already started the process and have had your first vaccination. But if you haven't, I would really encourage you to do so. I did it today. I'm feeling fine, feeling pretty good. I don't like getting poked in the arm, but other than that, it went really, really well. And looking forward to getting my second one a few weeks out. One of the things that has been a constant conversation around our COVID-19 response, we get this question, I get it multiple times a week, is are we going to require people to get the vaccine? And I see Nathan Thomas is on the call as well. Nathan, if I get any of this wrong, you're going to chime in and correct me in real time. Please do, because this is something we've been following and it changes quickly. At this time, we do not anticipate requiring the vaccine for anybody, especially for this semester. It's just now becoming available. And our feeling is by the time it would be readily available to everyone, the impact for this semester on campus would basically be too late. So we're not requiring it at this time. It still is to some extent emergency use only. So even if we wanted to require it, we legally can't yet. The question we get a lot is, what are we going to do in the fall? And one of the things that has been key for us throughout this entire process, one of the key benchmarks we've used in all things COVID is to follow the science. Science-based institution, we follow the science. And right now, the science on whether it makes sense to require a vaccination in the fall is quite frankly pretty unclear. And so it's not that we're avoiding making the decision. What we're doing is we're allowing the science to evolve a little bit more before we get to the point that we have to make that decision. So it's something we continue to watch on a weekly basis, and stay tuned for more information. The other question I get with some regularity is, are we going to try to become a university vaccination site? We continue to work with the health department to talk about whether that may be possible. The challenging part that comes in now is, even if we were to be able to do that, especially for our students, by the time they would be eligible for the first vaccine and then eligible for the second vaccine, they would no longer be on campus potentially. So we'll continue to monitor it, we'll continue to watch it, but as of right now, not requiring the vaccine. It's not clear whether we will eventually become a site for the vaccine, but despite that, I've done it. I encourage all you to do it as well. It's a key part of helping us all be healthy and safe moving forward. So I just thought I'd start and share a little bit about that. I'm going to shift topics. And by the way, when I do that, if anybody has any questions or comments about something I just said, pull me back. I don't mind doing that at all. I'd rather catch some of that in real time. But that's a little bit about where we're at with our COVID response. One other thing I'll just add is we're not out of this yet. And one of the things I get a little bit concerned about right now is the term that I picked up from Dr. Ted Binder from Unity Place, which is the mental health group at Unity Point. He mentioned this idea of caution fatigue. And boy, I'm just a little concerned that we be careful not to let up too early. What we're seeing is in the state and elsewhere, the virus is starting to pick back up again a little bit. I'm hoping it's just a blip and we continue to keep it under control, but we need to continue to remain vigilant until we get more people vaccinated. So just something to be aware of and be thoughtful as we go forward in the weeks ahead. We are moving forward in a lot of different areas. One of the areas we're moving forward rather aggressively is with the strategic planning process. There has been a lot of work happened there very quickly. I want to give a shout out to various groups. I want to really thank the 3 faculty staff teams who have this week been delivering information on strategic profile, environmental industry analysis, and competitive analysis. I think there were a total of around 30 colleagues involved in putting that information together. I haven't seen it yet. We get to see it as part of the strategic leadership group tomorrow. I believe, Chris, I'm looking at your box. It is tomorrow, right? When we see it all. Great, thank you. It's and pretty excited about that. And I'll give a shout out to Chris too for leading all this effort. He's done such a great job in managing this very complex process, including doing it in a way that gets a lot of folks involved. Another place where I know many of you stepped up to help was a series of faculty staff teams who helped us put together student focus groups and then also prepared a report talking about that information. Those reports and a bunch of other information is all being captured and being shared, not only with, obviously in the sessions that they did this week, we'll hear about it as a strategic leadership group on Friday. And then once all that material has been put together, you will see all of that on the website. One of the things we're trying to do is make all this information available to everybody pretty much in real time. A bunch of it's already on the website, a bunch of it is coming. And one of the things we want to do is after we've had a chance to share some of this, this is more kind of the input as we start thinking about pulling together the strategy. You'll see more of this developing. And as we do, we're making it available online, and we're going to hold a couple of open faculty staff forums, still working out the details and the timing and everything, but stay tuned for more information. Because once we have all the information put together, we put it out there, had a chance to digest it a little bit. We want to have these forums to, first of all, answer any questions that people may have, but also get more feedback on things that we may have missed, things that you think are key inputs that we still need to be thinking about as we start working on the strategy. And so stay tuned for more information about when those sessions will be coming forward. Okay, another thing we're trying to do is we're trying to get more refined in how we communicate what's happening on campus. One of the things that's been really tricky for me, I actually heard somebody say the other day, how has your honeymoon on campus been going? I thought, well, what a weird concept really, because I'm in a honeymoon where I haven't met most of the people that I'm now connected with. The weirdness of our current environment makes that very, very strange. But that doesn't stop us from being able to communicate. And one of the forums that we've now created as a way of communicating is something that went out, I think it was last week, I'm losing sense of my weeks here, called the Bradley Briefing. And it's an opportunity for me to just do some very high level picture of things that we're working on that are perhaps strategic in nature, and I just want everybody to be aware of. There's a lot of things going on campus, and I know especially in our current environment, it's not always easy to find ways to communicate some of the key things that we're working on. The idea of the Bradley Briefing is to do that. And as I mentioned in that first Bradley Briefing, talked to Renee Charles a lot about this. She's a great thought partner in thinking through these kind of things. Our intent is to do these Bradley Briefings twice a month. I almost said twice a week. That would be overkill. Twice a month as we go through the semester, probably drop down to once a month once we get into the summer. And based on your feedback and based on other things, we'll determine whether we want to go back to twice a month or once a month moving forward. But this is a communication forum I intend to keep doing. The idea is to share key information, to keep it short, and in some cases provide links to more information. In this first one, there was some information about the strategic planning process with a link to the website. And as Matt mentioned earlier, we also announced in that first Bradley Briefing that we are creating a new position, a VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I know this is something that many of you in different groups, there was a report some time ago on gender equity that talked about this as an important piece. There was a task force put together looking at diversity and inclusion on campus. Their number one recommendation was to create a VP level position that reports directly to me. And so we're moving forward with that. And that's something I'm really excited to be able to move forward with. It's something that I know many of you have been talking about and asking about for a while. And it's one of those key investments.
Earl George, why do we need one?
Why do we need this position?
Yes.
So it's a good question. One of the things that when I first was looking at Bradley and thinking about where we're at in our positioning, it became really clear early on that we do a particularly good job of attracting, and I'm going to use numbers out of US News and World Report, how they report about it, because that's where I got my numbers from. We are particularly good at attracting first-generation college students. We outperform our peers significantly on that, and also students of color is the term they use, and we significantly outperform our students there, as well, I mean our peers there as well. If you take the top 10, US News and World Report breaks out schools by regional master's granting, we're in that category. If you take the top 10 schools in that list, we are in the top 3. So we do a really good job of recruiting a diverse student base, for example. I learned in my first few months here that we have some opportunities to create a more inclusive campus, and got some pretty strong feedback on that. And I was also on a statewide task force. I think the name of the task force was Improved Access and Success of Black Students in Illinois, and looked at a lot of data on things like retention and graduation rates. And unfortunately, we follow state trends on that, and that for our students of color, the numbers are quite a bit lower. So it's an opportunity for us to really step into our mission more effectively. And this person is going to help us lead the charge on figuring out how to do that better, how to create a more equitable and inclusive environment. So that was the drive behind it. Again, it was the #1 recommendation from a variety of groups. I tell you, I think there's a lot, probably not as much information as you were hoping for, but I'll direct you where you can find more information. Chris, I was looking for your box. I think we include the diversity, the racial equity, I think is they renamed themselves. I think it's called the Racial Equity Task Force. I believe their report is now on the strategy website. Is that correct?
It is under supplemental documents along with the Gender Equity Task Force.
Okay.
report.
It's a long document, by the way. They did a really outstanding job of really digging into the data, trying to understand the challenges, understanding what we need to do to create a more inclusive environment. And so if you're looking for more information, I would encourage you to go look at that report, because they did, and I know a number of you were involved in that group, what a really spectacular job of outlining and making the case as to why we need to get more thoughtful on how we move forward in this area.
Thank you.
No problem. I appreciate the question. And it allowed me to refer people to the resource if they're interested. So thank you for that. The other thing that's a little bit interesting about the position and that I get excited about, we've actually hired the search firm of Spellman Johnson to help us begin the search. Nathan Thomas, who I think is on I see Nathan's box, is going to serve as the search chair. We're putting together a search committee. Matt, I think that the Senate is actively involved in electing some representatives to serve on that search committee. I see Matt nodding, so I'm going to count that as a yes. So that's in process. We're putting it together. One of the things that we got really good feedback from the search firm is that this has to be an inclusive process. We have to give people an opportunity to be connected to and involved in the search. We may or may not be able to finish this by the end of the semester. And if that's the case, it'll probably push into the fall before we complete the search. One of the things, there's a classic John Wooden quote that I'm a fan of, says, "Be quick, but don't hurry." So we've told Spellman Johnson, we want to be quick here, but we also want to make sure we get this right. So we'll have a better sense of timeline as we start working with them, but just know that that's something we're actively working on. One of the things they shared with us is these are hot searches right now. There's a lot of them. And one big question is, how do you distinguish yourself in the marketplace? Two things help us. For one, it is going to be a direct report to me. It's going to be a VP level position, sit in the senior leadership team of the university, be part of that conversation on a weekly basis. That's important. And then the other piece is through fundraising. We've committed to raising and already made significant progress on raising $500,000 of programming support for the first 2 years for this position. And the idea is we'll fund it for 2 years at we will fund it into perpetuity for $250,000. And we'll have that funding right up front from fundraising for the first 2 years. my expectation is we'll continue to fundraise and find great support for this role moving forward. So this individual will have resources to work with out the gate. And that's obviously for many people that are looking at these positions, that's one of their concerns as well. Will I have resources to really help move the needle? And the answer in our case, because of our philanthropy, is yes. And we're early in that process, but I get excited about being able to share some of the folks that are stepping up to help us support this as well fiscally. So it's not going to hit the operating budget in terms of those activity funds, but we'll be able to do that through philanthropy, which is pretty exciting. Please, Jackie.
Oh, yes. So I just wondered if for senators who might be concerned about adding on another VP level appointment, I wondered if you might address the kind of bottom line reasons why having this position is good for us as an institution.
Yeah, it's actually a great question. We've talked a lot about this, both in terms of the funding of the position and then the fundraising around support for the position. Let me start on the fundraising side. One of the things that's interesting is we have a great group of alums who are passionate about the institution, but who from a fundraising perspective have been sitting on the sidelines and have not been contributing. And the reason they're not contributing is they've had some frustrations with our efforts in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So one of the things we've been able to do in this case is to reach out to that group and say, no, we're serious and we could use your help. So one of the things that we're seeing already, and I think our VP of advancement, Erin Genovese, might be on here someplace, but we're seeing individuals stepping forward to support who have been pretty quiet in their support up till now. And so it really creates an opportunity to create pathways of support, fiscal support, fundraising support that didn't exist otherwise. The other thing that was really revealing to me, if you go look at that report put together by the task force, is there is a significant gap on retention and graduation. And we've been able to, we did some quick math. I have to go back and look at it. I don't have it in front of me, so I wouldn't be able to share the exact numbers with you. But this position pays for itself if we can close those gaps on really making sure that the retention and the graduation rates are there, keeping the students here. Really, and what I love about this role is it's the right thing to do, and financially, it's the smart thing to do. And it's wonderful when you get one of those. It's right and it's smart. So fiscally, it actually makes a lot of sense. So I think financially, it's an easy pitch because we can almost immediately pencil out and say, no, this is a position that more than fiscally pays for itself. And it also is so core to mission, right? I mean, we're so clear on our mission about immediate and sustained success for our students. And if our students aren't retaining and not graduating, we have failed in that mission. So I get really excited about this because it's both mission critical and fiscally smart. And one of the things, it's almost a great lead in. I'm going to talk just a minute about some of the things we're doing fiscally and about our managing of the deficit. But part of what we've got to do to get ahead of our deficit is cost containment is critical. We've made some really tough decisions in the area of cost containment this last year. And now we've got to start making some strategic investments. We cut our deficit we have a structural deficit, operating deficit of about 10 million. We've cut that roughly in half. And the way we move forward is by making investments. This is an example of that, where we can begin to see where if we do well in this search and in this role, which we will, it can have a rather significant and rather quick fiscal impact as well. Jackie, I hope that kind of answers your question, but I'm happy to try to share more if it would be helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Boy, what a great lead in, because one of the things I do want to talk about is I want to talk a little bit about the deficit issue. One of the things that's interesting, and I've shared this with you all before, still getting my head around this fact that anytime we say something about how we're functioning as a university, it often shows up in the local media. And so the world pretty much knows that we're operating with a deficit, but I think there's some misunderstanding as to what that actually means. And we want to start having more and more of a conversation around where we're at fiscally as a university. I suspect there's some finance colleagues on here, and actually our CFO's on here. She's going to be speaking in just a minute. So I'm not going to go into this in great detail. But there's a big difference between an operating deficit and a cash deficit. And we don't have a cash deficit, we have an operating deficit. An operating deficit basically means you're not reinvesting in, roughly speaking, property, plant, equipment, facilities to make sure that you're staying healthy from a physical plant perspective and a variety of other ways. And that's been a challenge for us. We've been running a deficit now for a bit. We still have, when we run out our budget, take COVID out. There's some additional COVID expenses we're going to have this year that's going to make our deficit a little bit higher. But we still have roughly a $5 million structural operating deficit. And one of the ways you get out of that is by beginning to make investments that help you move forward. So when I think about the difference between an I really should let the finance folks talk about this. And Cheryl, if I'm getting any of this wrong, you're going to come in and correct me when you jump in here just a second. But an operating deficit, again, you're not making the investments you need to be successful long-term. And it doesn't immediately knock you out, but it's a slow death if you don't deal with it, right? You eventually decline, you get yourself into trouble, and you eventually, it eventually becomes a cash deficit issue. A cash deficit basically means we don't have the money to pay our bills today. So an operating deficit can get you into trouble over time. A cash deficit puts you out of business like tomorrow. And thankfully, we've never had a cash deficit. And that allows us to start making some key investments that allow us now to start chipping away at the operating deficit to get ourselves in strong financial position. And so one of the things you're going to see in this coming year is, in addition, we'll continue to have to be thoughtful about costs. That unfortunately is part of the equation as well. But we'll also have to be thoughtful about making key investments that help us move forward in positive ways. The VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is an example of that. Other areas where we're going to spend some money to help us make sure we can tackle the deficit is, it really came up in the faculty feedback on the strategy around work we need to do in terms of branding and marketing. And we're doing that. We're actually working with a branding firm. I know some of you were involved in an interview with a group called the Polish Group. That'll be rolling out soon. I've seen an initial draft of their work. It's pretty exciting stuff. We almost can't move on that fast enough. And I think the idea is to start rolling out some of that new additional branding here soon. We've made some significant investments in the area of our advancement work. So we've actually, one of the things we did is we just recently hired, we had some open positions that we filled. We actually re-emerged a position that existed before that we ended up eliminating somewhere along the way of an advancement person up in Chicago. So for those of you that have been here a while, you know Chicago is one of our absolute hottest markets, both in terms of students and in terms of alums. There is a great network of alums up in Chicago. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Chicago raising money. And now we have I have a full-time partner up there to do that. And the nice thing about an advancement position is they have a scorecard. We will know that position's being beneficial for us pretty quickly in our ability to raise funds in that market that we haven't been able to do in recent years otherwise. And again, that was another thing as I looked at the feedback that I was getting from those faculty reports, a lot of conversations around the opportunity to do more in the area of advancement in terms of fundraising. Totally agree. I consider myself one of, if not the key chief advancement officer for the university. So we're going to be doing a lot of fundraising. And that's one of the ways we help get ourselves out of the operating deficit. We've talked about new programs. The work we're doing in the strategy area is a key part of helping us think about how we position the university for success. And one of the absolute keys to this, and I'm going to kick this over to Cheryl Cox in just a second. Cheryl is our COO, CFO. One of the key pieces to being able to do this well is to really have a good understanding of your financial situation. And some of you know this, but one of the things that was a bit of a challenge when I first walked in, and I've seen this come out in reports for things like the University Resource Planning Committee, we did not have good systems for getting optics into our finances. one of the things we were doing about a year ago is we were actually closing the books on a quarterly basis. And it's interesting, that may be okay in a highly stable environment. And for many, many years, I would consider higher education was operating in a very stable environment. You could close your books quarterly and get away with it. As things have become more dynamic, boy, you just can't afford to do that anymore. You got to really be able to close your books on a monthly basis. Hats off to the finance team. I know they worked really, really hard to get to the point where we can now close on a monthly basis that allows us to watch things a little bit closer. And the other thing that I get really excited about is we've actually now created a cash flow model. That's something we didn't have. And as I mentioned earlier, cash flow is the one that gets you into trouble really, really fast. So you better have a good sense of where you're at on cash flow. We didn't have that information, but we've got it now. And interestingly, the driving force behind that, the person that actually helped create our cash flow model is Cheryl Cox, our new COO, CFO. In fact, she has been with us almost a year, and I'll let Cheryl talk a little bit about how long she's actually been here. She's been here almost a year, I think. And part of that work has been on a contract basis to help us do things like get a better understanding of our cash flow and understand our finances. And it's that understanding of the finances and the cash flow that allows us to make these key strategic investments that are going to allow us to get out from under this continued operating deficit. So on that note, I'd like to kick it over to Cheryl, if I may, and then we can both come back and answer some more questions and talk a little bit about things related to finance in general. But Cheryl, do you want to, Matt, is it okay if I just turn it over to Cheryl and kind of let her take the report from here, and then we'll do it as a summary conversation, a summary Q&A between the two of us?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, great. Cheryl, all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on campus today. I always enjoy seeing the quad and students out. It's a lot of fun. But I do want to piggyback on what President Staniford has conveyed to us in that, we have been working on our financial reporting system as well as processes since, I would say, June of last year. That's when I kind of came on board, did a lot of consulting. And I do want to assure everyone that we really have some terrific people in the controller's office. They work hard. You never have to question their competency. They're good at what they do, but we have lacked system support and processes in the past. And I'm just acknowledging facts. So there are a lot of opportunities as we move forward to bringing new systems, new processes in the financial arena. And as President Staniford mentioned earlier, cash flow is critical. Absolutely. We did not have a cash flow model until, I want to say it was probably September of last year. And we update that cash model on a weekly basis. It is probably the most critical report that we keep our eyes on, especially in this very, I don't know, it's an era of lots of peaks and valleys, and we have to pay for this now that may be COVID related. I'll tell you, just candidly, last semester, just keeping our cadence on the financials was really tough when you're delivering refunds because of the online rolling option. It's been a lot coming at the controller's office. And our focus has really been, establishing reliable financial projections, cash as well as profitability. We're now closing the books on a monthly basis, as President Staniford said, and the department heads have the ability to go in and look at their budget versus actual on a monthly basis. That has never happened in the past in the history of Bradley, at least to my knowledge. let's see, what else can I tell you is that we have, so that visibility of the actual budget to the actuals has allowed us to make some decisions more timely. Let me just say decisions are more timely. Last year, we didn't even have a monthly budget. We had an annual budget. This year we have a monthly budget. Pretty cool. And the long story short, what this has been able to do for us is that last September, we delivered a forecast to our board, and that forecast has remained very stable because of the upgraded financial processes and the systems. And just recognizing, yes, we still have some work to do, but the information truly is timely. On a similar note, I do want to talk about increased transparency and what's coming next. In our budget process this year, we are parallel budgeting, for lack of better words. It's, again, it's double duty on pretty much the finance and budgeting team here. So we will be budgeting via our legacy financial model, what have you. But most importantly, we're also developing a budget called RCM, Responsibility Centered Management. And essentially what this does is it focuses the revenues and the expenses on a school by school basis, rather than, okay, here's your department advancement, here's your budget for advancement. We will be able to see by school the contributions that each school delivers to the university. So this year it's just going to be, okay, here's what it looks like given the data that we have. We're not holding anyone accountable to it. Next year is going to be the year that we hope to implement it in its entirety.
Pardon me, but Cheryl, when you say school, could you clarify that in Bradley terms? Because there's departments and there are colleges and there's the library. And when you say school, I'm unclear of what you're talking about.
I may miss some colleges here, but we have, our 5 primary colleges. Walter, you may, I know you're online, you're going to have to help me on this, but we have the College of Business, we have the College of Engineering, we have the EHS, we have, what am I missing?
LAS.
LAS and
Education and Fine Arts.
And yes, Fine Arts, thank you. Does that help? So those are the 5 colleges that we'll be focusing on.
Right. I understand. When you said school, every once in a while, there's something that doesn't quite translate into a Bradleyism. And I wanted to make sure that when you said school, you were translating college.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, I am getting used to the terminology. So
there's a lot of Bradleyisms.
There really are. So have patience with me. So that's it. That's the RCM path that we hope to implement this year as well as next year. Let's see what else. And then I would say, I did want to mention that when we implement RCM, what that does, and even in our current model today, it is a little more flexible in that should enrollments vacillate up or down, we will be able to flex and understand those impacts very readily. And that's the beauty of where we are today versus where we were a year ago. And I just want to emphasize that we are making key investments for the longevity of the university. And that's critical of the institution. I don't know who's muted, but I hope you can hear me. At this point, I'm going to hand it back to President Stanifer.
Great. And I'll speak over the background noise, and hopefully you all can hear me as well. So a couple things that Cheryl mentioned, I just want to reinforce. Again, for those that are in the finance area, this will perhaps resonate with you. This was one of the most disruptive years I've ever seen from a finance perspective. The term the finance group often uses the puts and takes, the underspends in certain areas, the overspends in other areas, et cetera. And despite the noisiness of this year, I think we've probably been more on track with our budget this year than has been the case in a very long time. So what we projected is very close to what is actually going to happen and what we're ultimately going to be reporting to the board. And that's just an absolute huge shout out to the finance group. I just feel so much more confident in our finances than I did 8 months ago even. And one of the things that allows us to do also is when we look forward, we're looking to the coming year. All of us are following the enrollment numbers. If Justin Ball was on the call, I suspect he is at some point, he'll tell you that trying to predict what fall is going to look like this year is more complicated than it's ever been. There's a nice Chronicle article that just came out that basically said all the traditional metrics that VPs of enrollment use don't matter this year for a variety of reasons. So it's very difficult to project. The nice thing is we understand our finances well enough now. We can make projections and do scenario planning and project that out and have a good sense of the impact that we'll have regardless of the outcome. And as a result, today we can make investment decisions recognizing the possibilities of what might happen in the fall. And that's not something we've been able to do in recent years from what I can tell. And that's a pretty exciting place to be. And those investments are going to be what helps us get on the other side of this operating deficit. So I'm optimistic about where we're headed financially. We've got I don't want to be naive about the next couple of years, about the type of investments and the type of heavy lifting we're going to continue to have to do. But I am optimistic based on a much more refined, detailed understanding of where our finances are. And a huge shout out to Cheryl and the finance group for getting us to the point where we can actually do that. So just a quick summary about where we're at, and now would love to engage in conversation. Danielle, I see your hand up. You probably need to unmute so we can hear your question.
Thank you. So this is a question for Cheryl. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to understand more clearly how RCM works when, for instance, one unit serves 5 colleges. So that how are individual colleges, for instance, held responsible for vagaries that are beyond our control, such as recruitment, such as if, for instance, LAS just happens to have a huge discount rate because we bring the standards, academic standards up, we don't have that say-so on some questions. So I'd like to understand more clearly how that budgeting model will take those kinds of factors into account.
Yeah, I will talk conceptually if I can, Danielle. I'm not sure I'll be able to answer your question fully, but let's talk conceptually. The way that RCM actually works is that your revenue stream is segmented amongst the 5 colleges. And when I say revenues, that's really the net revenues. So we'll be able to look at the revenues and the discounts by college to get to a net revenue stream. And then we'll also look at, okay, if certain colleges have different fee structures, what have you, that goes in what we call a variable revenue stream for those particular colleges. And I'm sorry, I'm using that again, colleges. But
no, colleges is correct. Right. I think that's as Meg had put it, that's one of those Bradleyisms that I think we all understand.
Okay, so each of those colleges will have what we call the controllable revenues as well as the expenses to get us to what we call a contribution margin. And then so it's the revenue less the variable expenses by college. And then underneath that contribution margin, to your point, Danielle, is we will have some of the overheads allocated to specific colleges with certain key performance indicators. So for instance, let me just kind of give you a for instance, human resources. That particular overhead may go across the colleges depending upon how many full-time employees they have. Does this make sense? And then, you know, that's how it works, is it your overheads then get segmented to each of those colleges by a common denominator, whatever that may be as far as being most representative for distribution or allocation amongst those colleges. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And actually the human resources part of it that's an example that I can really wrap my head around. It's crystal clear. I know how to count up how many faculty there are, right? What I don't understand though, and what I think is of concern for LAS for your model is that we, I would say, we carry a lot of weight in terms of our core curriculum, our Bradley core, and those students don't necessarily belong to LAS. They belong to other colleges. So with this model, you know, quite often I'll have a classroom full of students who are engineers and nurses and business majors with maybe, if I'm lucky, 1 or 2 LAS students in it. So that's where the question comes in with the revenue production. This was a question that came up with the much vaunted or unvaunted program prioritization program. So you are dealing with some ghost inspectors here.
Okay, I appreciate those words of wisdom. Here's how we're thinking currently on this. It's not definitive by any way, shape, or form, but how we're thinking on the revenue stream, which to your point has some concern, is on the revenue stream, we would be segmenting the revenue stream amongst the colleges based upon student credit hours. And then maybe it may be a 2-tier approach, but student credit hours is an important factor in my mind of how we staff and the demand, meaning the students. What are the students taking? So that is a common KPI that is used in the RCM model. Does that help you? It's not the final. There will probably be a couple tiers of that, but beyond the student credit hours.
No, it does. And trying to mentally juggle the jobs to be done that we've been hearing about and the emphasis on what students come here wanting to teach or wanting to learn. It's reassuring to hear that credit hour production is still being considered as a factor.
Yep. Good question. Thank you.
You can see various hands, but a bunch of hands went up at once. So Matt, I don't know if you have a good method for figuring out who.
Well, I saw Wendy's go up slightly first, so slightly earlier. So Jackie's already asked one question.
My question has to do with how RCM will work with non-college entities on campus, like Meg's Library, like Student Affairs in general. How do they get a slice of the pie?
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you. At this juncture, we haven't gotten that far of the common denominator on some of these departments, but that is to be determined, and we will make it as representative as we can to the usage of those particular departments.
Just if I can jump on that, to give you a sense, Cheryl and I exist in offices. We don't generate, unless you're teaching on the side, I don't know about Cheryl. Neither one of us generates student credit hours, right? So we are part of that overhead expense. Now, certain things, I just went on about how important the finances are, right? And have good finances. So this will continue to invest in those key areas that are critical for running the university. So it isn't just, if you don't generate revenue, it's not relevant. It's actually not true. And even on the academic side, we'll be making some decisions around this group's contribution margin is higher, but part of what that does is it allows us to make investments over here where the contribution margins aren't as high, but we know it's an important part of our academic portfolio, if you will. So those are the kind of decisions, but we'll have better optics into it. That's really what this buys you, is you now have better optics. So you can make decisions around, gosh, we really think XYZ is important. It's expensive. So we better have high contribution margins over here to help pay for it. So it just allows you to make those decisions across programs and ways. So we may be investing in a program that has a high contribution margin because it partly, it's got to be a valid program, high quality program, contributes to our mission, obviously. But part of the reason we might want to invest more in it is to give us more flexibility to invest in other areas that don't have the same level of contribution margin. Right now, we don't even know how to do that. We're flying a little bit blind. So as we start making investments, it's not clear where we can make investments that help us support other areas because we don't understand the various contribution margins. And that's, sorry for me jumping in, Cheryl, you should probably jump in and back, but this is one of the most powerful parts of an RCM model, is it allows you to manage your finances in a way so you can invest in things that you think are important, but you also invest in those things that give you good returns to be able to invest in those things that you think are important. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's one of the most powerful aspects. I know the University Resource Planning Committee has been talking about this for a long time. And if you all have any additional insights, feel free to chime in, because I know it's something you all have been talking about and thinking about quite extensively.
I had a quick question in kind of to piggyback off of Wendy's. I understand there are units that don't generate any revenue, but there are other units other than the colleges that do generate revenue. Whether they make any profit or not is another situation maybe. But I'm wondering, will they also follow this RCM?
Yes, they will. We have yet to determine how that will, the end result of that is, I mean, there are a couple options. Do you use it as a net, do you put that in as a net expense? Do you create a new, division? We have not gotten that far yet. But it will be taken into consideration because the model is university wide. So we're taking all the revenue and all the expenses. It's just how are we accounting for that is still yet to be determined.
Jackie?
Yes, someone, a non-senator contacted me and asked me to pose this question for clarification. Gary Roberts scared us all by saying we had $3 to $4 million cash deficit. Now I hear that we don't have one. I don't understand. Can someone please clarify?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know the legacy on that. I'm going to correct what President Staniford said as far as we've never had a cash deficit. That's not true. We've not had a cash deficit during our tenure. Let me just say that. I don't know the history, and the history is a sunk cost in my mind. We're looking forward, so I don't know what the legacy is on that.
So Cheryl, I'll add a little bit more here from what I know, and I may be off a little bit on this. We have cash flow issues, as every university does. So we'll have expenses come in before we actually have the cash necessarily. So pretty much every university I know has lines of credit with banks that they'll lean on until those payments come in for, and what you do is you balance it at the end of the year to see where you're at. I could be off on this, but I think the cash deficit comments have been more around cash flow issues than it was around cash deficit issues, which are actually quite different. Now, I don't know the full history on this, so I don't want to go on record saying that that's the case, but I think that's probably what was being discussed. And that came partly because we didn't have a good sense of our cash flow. And when you don't have a good sense of your cash flow, you talk about worrying about cash deficits that may or may not be completely accurate. And for the finance nerd in me, and for those that are finance nerds, I was quite frankly freaking out when I first got here when we did not have a good cash flow model. I'm like, what? Wait, what? We don't have what? so that cash flow model is key. And if you don't have it, then you do panic that you've got a cash deficit because you're not able to track the flow of your cash accordingly. And we can do that now. So
yeah. And can I just clarify on this too? And when we say cash flow positive, that what we're saying is that we know our peaks and valleys. It's not like we have these lines of credits that we're not using. No, we're using our lines of credit when we need them. Trust me. But the peaks and valleys of our cash flow is very different from very different from the profit side when you look at the full P&L.
Ahmad?
Yeah, thanks. Am I on? Yes. Thanks for this is for Cheryl. Thanks for the report and clarifications. We seem to be having a much better model right now, financial model. Could you tell us what is your projection of our cash surplus for this year?
Cash surplus. Well, I will say, like I just said, there are lots of peaks and valleys. And I'll tell you at the end of the year, when there's no revenue coming in, that's when we take out our line of credit. So when you say cash surplus, I'm not sure what you mean. We always have tremendous cash investments on our balance sheet.
Now we know what is our revenue. I think the president mentioned that our operating deficit has been cut into by, I don't know, 5 million. It's now 5 million, correct? Or it is anticipated to be 5 million. So that means that if we deduct from that our depreciation, then that is going to give us our cash surplus. Do we have an idea what that cash surplus for the end of this fiscal year is going to be?
I will say, I don't want to put a number out there because we have yet to even get through fourth quarter and I haven't closed third quarter, but I will say that I anticipate it to be positive.
It won't be large. The other thing that is a little bit different this year than our prior years is our structural deficit, if it were not for COVID, would have been less than what we're going to get with COVID. So we're going to have some significant COVID expenses. So it'll likely be positive, but it won't be by much. And we'll still have the operating deficit, which means there's investments we should be making that we're not able to make because of our operating deficit. Is that accurate? I'm looking at Cheryl's box again to make sure I'm not saying, and I hope you'll always correct me in real time, Cheryl, because I'm married to a CFO, by the way, which is dangerous because it makes me think I know finance better than I do. But I always rely on the CFO to make sure I'm actually saying what I'm saying is accurate.
Well, like I said, it's really fluid right now as far as, and that's why I'm hedging, Ahmed, on this cash positive piece. And when I say it's really fluid, it's, the CARES Act funding, it's all the investments coming into play. And this is all fourth quarter stuff. So it's not like I got this crystal ball and say, okay, we're going to get, $1 million in CARES Act funding. I don't know that. I cannot, at this juncture, I can't say that specifically, but I will say that we will be, from a cash flow perspective, we will be okay and positive.
So thank you.
That's about as good as I can get.
I have one more question that related to RCM. There are many universities that have implemented RCM, and the devil is always in the details. And so have you looked at other universities, and which one of all of these different variations of RCMs that are implemented are we considering, or are we going to make up our own?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, I can answer that one. We are using, when you look online on RCM and who owns this space, just kind of go out and do your own Googling, whatever you want. Huron, when I did this on my own, Huron pretty much is a leader in this RCM, and there's also a tangent called incentive-based budgeting piece. And Huron is definitely the leader in this space, in the higher ed space. We have engaged Huron. They're working with us on the model side. their knowledge has been really, really quite valuable. Let me just put
So
it.
sure, when you say they're a leader in helping a bunch of these other universities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Louisville, yeah. University of Louisville. I mean, all you have to do is Google it. You can see where they have been a leader in many large universities, Alabama, Louisville, there are quite a few.
Thank you.
Sure. Megan.
This is actually more of two general questions. One I think is probably more important than the other. I would like more detail on enrollment for the fall. I think, Cheryl, you mentioned the idea of budgeting in a way that sort of helps withstand peaks and valleys in enrollment, but the last time I saw an ENBO report, it was pretty abysmal. And so I'd like more detail on where we are for enrollment for the fall. And I know that we can't make predictions, but I think my constituency and other faculty members who have been contacting me would like more detail. And then the other thing is, this is something I got a lot of messaging about. When it was announced that we were having in-person commencement, it seems that it was announced publicly before it was announced internally. And I don't think that went over well with a lot of people. To go back to sort of communication issues at Bradley, that just went out into the public sphere and that it was not told to faculty and staff first before it went out publicly. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
That first of all, the piece on the announcement, thank you for that. That's good feedback. We've been trying to be more thoughtful to make sure things are going out to faculty, staff first. And it sounds like we missed it on that one. So that's good feedback. Thank you for that. I'll take a shot at the enrollment one. And I don't know if Justin is on here or not, but he can jump in and fill in a little bit on this too. So it's noisy, unlike anything I have ever seen. There's a report we get. We're actually not allowed to talk about the individual schools in the data, but it's a comparative data set of about a dozen schools that we look at their enrollment numbers, their deposits, their applications, their admits. And because of my prior role and the institutions that are in that set, I've been following that report for about 6 years myself. And about this time of year, we get it, I think it's monthly, we get an update on where the various schools are at. And every school will report how far they're off on their deposits, for example, which I'm guessing, Megan, is one you're paying close attention. It's one I pay close attention to, so I assume many of you are as well. You look at the deposit numbers and you project on where you're at relative to where you were the prior year, right? So every school is going to have different numbers, but as a percentage of shift from their traditional, you would get information on that. In all the years I've been watching that, the largest percentage, and I actually asked Justin about this too, because he's been following this report even longer than I have. And I asked him, I said, Justin, have you ever seen a case where the bandwidth between the school that's having the best year and the worst year was more than 20%? So a school will be up, maybe one school will be up 10% one year, the worst school would be down 10%. And I think the worst I've ever seen in that bandwidth is about 20%. Right now, the bandwidth between the top and the bottom school is it's like 100%. It's pure noise. And one of the things that we're trying to get our heads around is, well, we know some schools, for example, there was one school on the list, they're reporting like they're up like 86%. They're not up 86% because a number of schools made the decision to report every accepted, they've eliminated the deposits this year. So every student that's accepted, they're saying if they were accepted, they deposited, which is not accurate. So it's noisy and it makes it very, very difficult to follow that data. I'll sleep a whole lot better when those numbers start solidifying. One of the things that we do know is one of the key reports that is usually an indicator of where we're at in the process is the filing of the FAFSA, which is this financial aid piece. The entire state, the entire nation is way behind in FAFSA filings. And what we can't figure out is everybody just behind? We know, talking to high school counselors, for example, they are way behind in terms of advising students and helping them move forward because they were dealing with their own COVID issues. And what we haven't gotten real clarity on is, are the numbers chaotic because of the delays or are they actually down? And we'll know that. Actually, usually we would say we know that May 1 because that's kind of that magical date when people are, I don't think we'll even know by May 1. I suspect you're going to have a lot of students that are making those final decisions into the summer. So lots of uncertainty. So so Megan, if you're worried about this, you're not alone. It's probably one of the things that I look at the most. And we actually put together a special enrollment task force that now meets. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow. We meet every week to talk about this. Our colleagues in different areas have really stepped up to try to think about ways we can start bringing those numbers together. Right now, year to date, we're reporting about 24% down from the prior year. But again, everything's delayed. So whether that's accurate or not, it could be the number ends up being quite different. Having said that, we're still being very aggressive about doing everything we can to make sure those numbers come together. So we've been talking, we'll talk again tomorrow every week to start thinking of things we can do to creatively bring the numbers together. It's a wild card for everybody. I think I mentioned earlier on, the Chronicle had this article, all the traditional metrics that enrollment teams would use to predict what's going to look like in the fall are off. So it's going to be a really challenging year. And I don't think we're going to have great clarity on this until the summer, quite frankly. I think that's when we're going to know. Almost certainly, by the way, nationwide, the discount rate is probably going to go up. There's a lot of schools that have dipped hard in terms of getting financial aid to try to make their classes this year. So I'd be willing to project that our discount rate is going to go up, and then we'll see what our actual numbers look like. Sorry, I'll stop in just a second. I feel like I'm going on, but we kind of knew that coming into the COVID environment, right? None of this is a huge surprise. And I remember I told the board at the beginning of this, I said, buckle up, the next 2 years are going to be rough, the next 2 years. And actually we were fortunate that this year wasn't nearly as rough as we had anticipated it might be. This year ended up, the enrollment numbers came together better than we had anticipated. We're prepared for that to not be the case in the fall, but boy, wouldn't that be nice too, if the numbers actually, and this year specifically, the same thing happened. We were trailing in numbers throughout the year, and then they came back in the final to be fairly solid. And I would like to think that we're going to get there again this year, but we're prepared for the possibility that that might not be the case. It was maybe an overly long answer to your short question, but to say we think about this every day might be an understatement.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if it was my answer that just killed the conversation or if that was, but I'm happy to provide more detail or answer more questions.
Steve,
Jeannie,
I think Jeannie's got a question.
What's that, Chris?
I think Jeannie Bukowski has a question.
I just saw her virtual hand, so please ask away.
You're muted. There you go, Jeannie.
Really more of a suggestion, a reiteration of something that came out of the Senate ad hoc committee. And that is to really, especially when we're talking about these models, the cash flow model and RCM, to really use some of the internal Bradley expertise, because of course, you know, there are people on campus who have been dealing with these issues for a long time. And in particular, someone who was very helpful during our ad hoc discussions and also with the University Resources Committee, Heather McCord in the Foster College of Business, has been really for years working on understanding the last regime's system, and also, you know, developing these types of models for the Foster College. So I just, it's not a question really, I just would like to reiterate that suggestion from the ad hoc, that we, as much as possible, really draw on the expertise we have on campus.
Noted.
Great recommendation. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Noted. Thank you.
And we are, in a lot of ways, Jeannie, will continue to do that. But thank you for that reminder. The University Resource Planning Committee for example, put a lot of work into some of this stuff, and they've been really helpful. By the way, I think you all know this, on the strategy side, our internal expert, Aaron Bushko, has been playing a key role for us as well. So we'll continue to lean on those internal experts where we can. Danielle?
This is a question that is not for you, Cheryl, So you can take a breath. It is for you, President Standiford. I wanted to comment on the Racial Equity Task Force report, which I was happy to see. As I've mentioned, I think in a previous meeting, I had the good fortune to actually be interviewed by a member of that team. So I felt an investment in it and was glad to see the outcome. The one thing that I would want to comment on and ask for some attention to be paid to in the initiatives that are coming out of that report is that there's really no attention that I could see that's being directly paid to the curriculum. It seems like it's largely, and I can very much understand why, largely an attention to climate outside of the classroom, and then some attention to who are the individuals who are the faces in those classrooms, right? And those are definitely areas that I concur with, and I think we all would. But we do have a strong existing framework of courses that deal with and thematize those forgotten histories, the cultural legacies, and the long-term systemic issues that exclusion and racism and bias have created. And so it seems to me that we do have that in place, but it seems to me that that's an area that really needs to grow with the changing demographics that we're looking at, especially in terms of honoring the heritage of our Latinx students. While having diverse representation in faculty across the campus is an absolute gold standard value, there's a great deal of impact that I think can be almost, quantum increase in impact of having, for instance, a Latinx teacher teaching a course that's about Latinx literature or about Latinx history. So I would just like to put that word in and just really encourage you to examine that gap or apparent gap, and to really try to address that. It means a lot to students when they can see that their heritage, their parents' heritage, their grandparents' heritage is being honored with study.
Thank you for that. It's a great observation, Danielle. One of the things we'll have to be thoughtful about, it's interesting, when we talked to Spielman Johnson about the search, they mentioned that this search, maybe more than almost any other search you do on campus, involves everyone, faculty, staff, students, alums, et cetera, But I was making a note to myself as you were saying this, when we interview these VPs of DE and I want to hear what their thoughts are on curriculum as well. And because that's something they should be partners in. Obviously, they're not going to be approving or pushing curriculum, but they can be partners in helping us understand how we can make sure that becomes an integral part of our curriculum as well. And if we get the right candidate, they should be able to be good partners. In fact, a lot of the work they'll be doing is in partnership with other groups. So they'll obviously be working very closely with HR, for example. I could see them working very closely with student affairs. And to your point, they also need to work very closely with academic affairs to make sure we're thinking about those issues as well. So I grabbed that as a note, and that's a great observation. I think I just saw something pop up in the chat. I want to see. Oh, I heard quorum. I saw that probably came up a long time ago and I just missed it.
Burl George, I have a question. These courses you want to see, these courses you want to see revised within the curriculum, are these just going to be feel-good courses, or are they actually going to supply our students with the necessary skills to be successful in the outside world?
So this is the power of having as someone that has that level of expertise that can help us understand that better. So I think this is why having someone like a VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion involved, helping us think through those issues is really important. And of course, if it's a curricular issue, that's something you all will discuss, right? So that then becomes something that you as a group will have to try to navigate through. And but I think it's going to be an important discussion over the next couple of years to start thinking about what that means and what that looks like. I punted on your question a little bit because it's a really tough question, right? So it's something, that's something I think we're gonna have to sort through that. That's something we're gonna have to talk about and think about and be thoughtful about. And I don't think they're good, easy answers to that, but I think engaging in a fairly comprehensive, intense dialogue as a university on that issue is something, it's time for us to start having those conversations.
Thank you.
We have sort of segued into curriculum-related issues. I'm wondering if the provost has anything he would like to say. He is on the agenda.
By the way, whoever had the water running in the background, that was very peaceful. I don't.
Oh, that's me. I'm sorry.
I actually kind of like it. It was very peaceful. Like it's very tranquil. So it's maybe a good lead into Walter's presentation.
I have a few things here. I want to start by congratulating the Bradley speech team, which is coached by Director of Forensics Andrew Ilola and Assistant Coach Tia Collins. The speech team has continued to compete this year using remote technology. They won yet another national championship. You may remember that collegiate speech has had 2 national championships using 2 different ways of identifying competitors. This year, a 3rd national championship was added using a 3rd way of identifying who would participate in the competition. And Bradley has won yet another national championship in the area of speech and forensics. And so they continue to do really well. In identifying them, then I also want to congratulate the Bradley National Collegiate Sales Team, coached by Brad Eskridge of the marketing department in the Foster College of Business. Brad coached the team to its 2nd consecutive national championship in the sales, the National Collegiate Sales Competition. And so we have another tradition developing there as well. And congratulations to Brad and his team. Third, I'd like to congratulate Coach Andrea Gorski and the women's basketball team for winning the Missouri Valley Conference Championship and making Bradley's first appearance in the women's NCAA tournament. We're very proud of all of these student competitors and the coaches who are working with them. In terms of my report in particular, then I want to report on a couple of things. I want to remind everybody that the Higher Learning Commission will be doing a virtual visit, though one of the members of that group will be doing an actual physical visit to campus April 19th and 20th of this year. The assurance argument that would have previously been called the self-study was submitted this last Monday on March 22nd. The final document has been posted as a PDF on the Bradley HLC website. Names of the peer review team have also been posted on the HLC website. The visit agenda would be posted there upon receipt from the HLC team chair. There will be opportunities to attend a virtual open forum. We hope you'll attend. Please watch the website and the B News for updates on that. You may hear from Jenny Burge or Molly Klusky before April 19th and 20th if the peer review team members request additional evidence. A typical example would be the syllabi for a particular course. The steering committee would like you to know, and they've said this, we've got this. And when they say we, they're talking about the Bradley community as a whole. I would like to thank Molly Klusky and Jenny Burge for their leadership these last 2 years in working on the HLC accreditation visit. I also want to thank the members of the steering committee, that includes Associate Dean Jennifer Robin, Professor of Communication Tony Adams, Associate Dean Jenna Hunziker, Interim Dean Kelly McConaughey, Professor of Economics Joshua Luer, the Registrar Andy Kindler, Associate Provost Joby Skaggs, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs John Knighty, Professor of English Seth Katz, and Lexi Lewandowski, Institutional Data Coordinator. All of these people have been working very hard for the last 2 years on preparing our assurance argument and making sure that we're ready as an institution. Though I'm not going to name all of them, I also want to thank the members of the subcommittees, the evidence providers, feedback providers. In essence, over 85 faculty and staff have shared their expertise in preparation and editing of the argument that we've presented to the HLC. They've done a lot of work, and they all deserve a great deal of recognition and thanks on our part. So thank you all. I want to mention that we are working with our partners at Pearson to expand our online offerings in nursing to include psychiatric nurse practitioners and geriatric nurse practitioners. We're also working on a face-to-face delivery of a new degree in occupational therapy. The work on that will be forthcoming. And then I want to remind everybody that Wednesday, April 7th will be our second no homework day. I would ask all of you to remind your colleagues about this, and I'm hoping everybody will honor this this effort to help give our students a little bit of a break. And I'm happy to try and answer questions with the 10 minutes or so that are remaining. Danielle.
Walter, I didn't have so much a question. I just want to say my appreciation for bringing light to all of those achievements that have been happening. We forget. I forget because of all the grading, so I appreciate that. And then I add my thanks to the HLC folks. I did want to also, though, put a plug in that the theater department has overcome this amazingly difficult challenge of no face-to-face, and they're presenting a live stream show this weekend. And I guess I want to plug for them because they're probably too humble to plug for themselves. But I'm really looking forward to it. And in addition, as a WGS contributor, it's a really, really important play in terms of issues around gender and around gendered violence. So sorry, Walter, no question for you today. Just thanks for thanks for your report.
Anybody else? I can only see one screen of people, so I can see about 20 or so people. If you have a question, just jump in.
Yeah, Walter, I have a question. Kevin Kimberlin from Physics. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
I have a question about the idea of a nursing program sponsored by Pearson. Is our nursing program an independent program, or is it administered by a publisher, Pearson? I don't quite understand that.
So Pearson is our partner in terms of online work that we have. We have 3 online graduate programs. We provide all of the instruction. They help us with recruiting. They help us with some aspects of course design so that we have a product that works well in an online environment. and they help us with some student support. But it is Bradley faculty who provide all of the instruction there. Currently, we have around 900 online graduate students who are Bradley students.
I see, because, from a physics point of view, I have pretty much, I probably could use some help from Pearson in administering my Astronomy 300 course that I've been under some pressure to put into a proper mode. And I was wondering, can I talk to Pearson about providing courses for Astronomy 300?
We have a very specific contract with Pearson about the graduate programs that they help us with. However, we're in the process of looking to expand some capacity around things like course design, et cetera. As we do that, then there may be an opportunity to provide some help there.
I would love some help. I would love some help because they've been under some significant stress. So thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
Are there any additional questions, comments? Thank you all for coming today. I would entertain a motion to dismiss. Motion to
So
adjourn.
moved, Steve Banning.
All right, thank you much. Vote with your mouse. You may vote with your mice. See you all next month.